What's up, everybody? It's your girl, Shanti Das, and welcome to another episode of the Silence to Shame podcast. I'm just so grateful that we are still able to do this storytelling and put this content out in the market. Our first podcast launched in 2017, and here we are in 2025, still doing this great work in the community. And wouldn't be able to do this season without one of our gracious funders. And so I am super excited about our guest today. I want to welcome our dear friend and colleague of the Silence to Shame podcast, Miss Amber Cargill.
Hey,
she
Shanti.
is a psychologist and the director of player wellness and affairs for the NFL Players Association. And just shout out to the NFL Players Association who are funding this podcast for us and allow us to be able to do this incredible work. And we are a second-time beneficiary of this, being a mental wellness partner with the NFLPA. So y'all give a big welcome to Amber. Welcome to the show, Amber.
Thank you.
How are
Happy
you?
to be here. Happy to support the work you're doing. You know,
Yeah.
you're doing big things and we're happy to support.
Well, thank you so much. So I'm going to jump right in. I want to ask you, Amber, tell us about your background and how you started your career with working with athletes and mental health.
Yeah, it's I don't want to say it's not that interesting, but you know, I think I learned sometime in high school I wanted to be a psychologist. I wanted to do the mental health work.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think I somehow became the person that my friends would talk to, and then you know, The Sopranos was on around that time,
Yep.
and Dr. Melfi was amazing, and I'm like, oh, you can actually get paid for doing this. So that's what I pursued when I went to college. And so I had no idea about the world of sports psychology until I think my junior year in college. And I took this sports psychology class and it's like, okay, so you can work with athletes and do the mental health work. Cool. But I think back then, you know, and I can now say back then, sports psychology and mental health work with athletes was nowhere near what it is right now.
I can only imagine.
And so, you know, it was one of those things where I was applying to grad school and, you know, it's like the practical side of me took over and is like, well, you have to make a living. You can't, you know, go chasing your dreams. You have student loans to pay off. You got to just go be a regular psychologist. And so that's what I did. I went to the Graduate School of Applied and Professional Psychology at Rutgers University with the intention of being a regular clinical psychologist. Did not know, though, that when I got there that the sports psychologist for the Cleveland Indians at the time was on faculty.
Really?
So, yeah, which was, and he was so connected with, you know, obviously the teams in Cleveland, but also with Rutgers athletics and just the community in the New York, New Jersey area. And I was like, okay, so then now I guess I can at least academically learn what I need to learn while I'm here. And even if I have to be a regular psychologist after this, fine, but at least I've gotten the training. And so worked with him for my time while I was in grad school, Dr. Charlie Marr, shout out to him.
Mm-hmm.
It's my guy. And, you know, so then, you know, we have to do a year-long internship. So I did that at a hospital to make sure that my clinical skills were up to speed.
Yep.
And then did a full year residency at the University of Oklahoma in their athletic department. At the time, it was only one of two postdocs in the country.
Wow.
Where you were exclusively working with athletes. And so to me, like of all of my experience.
And what year was that, if I can ask?
That was 2009.
Okay.
2010, yeah. And so, you know, the thing is that throughout my training, like, you know, in grad school, you treat clients under heavy supervision. And so you're learning about you're hearing the stories of athletes all the time. The thing about working in an athletic department is you get that context. And the athlete context is so pivotal to who they show up as in your office that if you don't understand, you know, what acronyms are and what it means that study hall is at this time to this time, or that it's that, you know, I think if you don't understand that context, then it's really hard to place the story you're hearing within the larger context of what their everyday lives are. And so I'm so grateful to that experience, not only for just helping me understand the context, but a lot of my contacts came from that year-long experience. And so I think that really sort of solidified that, at some point I actually do want to pursue this. I've put a lot of time and energy into learning the sports psych stuff. And so I came and moved to DC after my year in Oklahoma, worked for some community services locally, and then worked for the George Washington University in the counseling center, but was the liaison to the athletic department. So was able to sort of marry the two very well. And then, I'm in DC, and just so happens the NFLPA was literally right up the street. And so I had worked with my predecessor on a project where, in her brilliance, she was really trying to work on getting ahead of some of the issues by working with colleges. And so she and I connected. We did a program for GW's athletic department at the time that was really successful. And so when she then vacated the position, she, let me know that it was available. And so here I am. And I'm grateful to be here and grateful to her for the, really sort of access to kind of understanding what it meant to kind of be over in the NFLPA and just what it took to be able to think through, like, yeah, you've got to be thinking ahead, and how can we get ahead of some of these things? So that's how I got here. Kind of a not that interesting of a story, but
no, actually, it is very interesting. Thank you, Amber, for sharing your journey. I want to ask you, did you ever play any sports yourself?
Yeah, so I played softball in high school,
Okay.
and then got to college and did the club team for a little tiny bit, but saw that, you do not have the same level of support when you are doing things at the club level that I think the student athletes tend to have. And not gonna lie, UNC Chapel Hill kicked my behind the first couple of semesters, and so I had to make a choice for myself in my grades. And so, but yeah, I mean, I've always been into sports. My dad and my brother played basketball, so growing up, that's all I was around. And it just the when I discovered this class at Carolina, it was sort of like, really, like I can,
You
I've
can
been looking
marry
at
some
athletes.
passions, right?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
all my life, I'm an avid sports fan.
Yeah.
There's a way to sort of do the work that you think you really like and engage with it within the sport context that you love. So
Yeah.
that was I'm grateful just that these things I was exposed to these things at the times in which I was exposed.
Absolutely. And the reason I ask you that because, I think growing up, my family and myself, we're big fans, sports fans as well. And then just having dealt with mental health challenges with individuals within the family, and then my dad taking his own life, you when you look at athletics, though, I think we're traditionally taught, right? You have to have this mental toughness, right? This mental agility, if you will. I would beg to think, I mean, I would like to think that it's changed, right, and grown and evolved over the years, even in what, say, the 15 plus years you've been in this space and literally working with professional athletes. What is the difference when you think about like that mental toughness that the coaches and other people on the teams, really I won't say impose upon, but it's a part of the sport. It's a part of coaching. It's a part of, what that athlete learns, right? When they're learning the drills, but you also got to learn to have this mental toughness. But we've seen also in the last 10 to 15 years a shift of what that narrative looked like when you talk about mental toughness versus mental illness or mental health challenges. Can you talk a little bit just about that dynamic? And then, I'll get into a more, I guess, pointed question around, the NFL and NFLPA and what you do with your athletes. But I just think a lot of people confuse, what mental toughness is versus, or whether it really is like mental health support, right?
Yeah.
When in sports. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense.
Okay.
And I think, why some confusion might still exist is because I don't think that we've gotten away from that language.
Mm.
in many ways, there are, ways in which athletes demonstrate so much resilience, right? Like there's adversity that they deal with in their everyday sort of drills and practice, and you have to push yourself harder than other people have to push themselves physically and mentally, right? So
Mm-hmm.
so there is a way in which that language still gets used all the time. You have to be mentally tough, and are you mentally, that gets thrown around a lot. I think what has shifted, if anything, is the consequences of that language.
Mm.
Right. And so I think both for athletes and now coaches, what does it mean to be mentally tough? I think has taken on a different meaning. So from the
Okay.
athlete side, they, I think, if I can say, they may have been a little bit quicker to recognize some of the potential problems with language like
Sure.
that, right? Like they may have been or have suffered the consequences of that language and felt the impact of it. And maybe now in our, current climate, or climates that have persisted before now, have felt more empowered to speak up about it, right? And to say, hold on, that's not okay. It is actually okay for me to respond to these adverse situations
Mm-hmm.
in these particular ways, right? And I think the coaching community and the athletic departments on the whole sort of caught up to that, right? And I think that's why you've seen the proliferation of mental health professionals in athletic departments now. So as I was saying before, there was only two when I was, getting my postdoc. That wasn't that long ago, right? And
Yeah.
it was, and now, pretty much all, some, by virtue of having the NCAA come out and say, hey, this needs to happen. Either the person is in athletics exclusively, or they have relationships with their counseling center where they farm out somebody full time and they have ties, or at least on some level there's somebody identified to work with student athletes. And so to me, the language persists, and there is some element of, I don't want to say truth, but there is something to it. We understand that athletes are resilient, and it takes a certain mentality to be able to pursue this athletic dream to the highest levels. And I think we're all sort of becoming more conscious of the impact of such language, and are adjusting therein.
That's right. Thank you. That's great information. I think a lot of people will learn a lot, even just from that. I appreciate you breaking that down.
Yeah.
My next question for you is, the mental well-being of players are critical, right? Whether you're at the collegiate level or the professional level. And we know the pressures that can come from the NFL. It's just a very competitive, league, and something that we all love. I'm actually sitting here waiting for August to get here because I get so excited when it's time to do my fantasy league. But we know those pressures, though, Amber, can lead to more stress, more anxiety. You add that in with just your normal everyday life pressures, and it can be a lot. So I'd love for you to just talk a little bit about how important it is from an NFL Players Association standpoint, providing those resources and support systems that, you all do, and the PAF has a lot of resources, and just how that can really foster a healthier environment, both on and off the field for the players.
Yeah. So I know you've had guests on, from our space in the past, but
Yep.
it might be helpful just to kind of level set as to
Sure.
you know, what NFL players tend to deal with, right?
Yes.
So
Okay.
I'll start with the rookies. So you
Okay.
think about a senior on a regular trajectory, a senior coming out of college. His season starts from the end of August through sometime late November, early December. If his team makes a bowl game and he opts into said bowl game, he's playing through the end of December, maybe early January. Now, late January, he's still potentially playing. Then you have the All-Star games that come up right at the end of January, early February. And then you're going into the combine in February. Then you have like another couple of months of training. But during that time, you're meeting with scouts and you're training. So for rookies, literally up until draft day, they have had no break.
That's
They're
insane.
going they're going from last August when their season started, which means they went back to their training camp sometime over the summer, if, in college, you still got to take classes. So many of them were in summer school. So
Mm,
just think about that for a second. They have
wow.
literally had no break, and they go straight through all the way through when training camp starts at the end of July, right? So that in and of itself
Yeah.
just speaks to incredible, mental toughness, if we're going to use that word, right? Like, so
And
you
even
can see why people
exhaustion, right? Just mental
well,
exhaustion.
I
Yeah.
was going to get to
Oh,
that in a
okay.
second, right?
Okay, sorry.
On the first,
Yes.
on the sort of resilience end, for those that you see, then the rookies who get drafted and go out there and then during their first year are performing at a high level, just think about what they went through that whole first year. They've had no break. Um, but like you just said, that also leads to like some incredible exhaustion. And when we're meeting with rookies at combine, the one thing I say is this is probably the most stressful 6 months of your life that you've ever had, right? And so we need to just make sure that we're saying that and being clear about that. And that, that doesn't have to have any impact on what your success is. We just need to call it out, right?
Hmm.
So it's important to make sure that you understand who you are as a human being, and so that you know what you need to do to take care of yourself at the times in which you need to, right? So I wanted to just kind of level set that. But
Absolutely.
for our vets, let's say they make the playoffs. They're playing until late January sometimes, right? And then they have a little bit of a break. Then they're back at work for off-season training activities, and they get another little bit of break before training camp starts. So again, like the NFL lifestyle in terms of when they have to work is it takes a lot more of the calendar year than I think
Mm.
most of the public really realizes.
Hmm.
So why is it important to make sure that we from the union standpoint are telling guys to take care of themselves? Is because we understand that there are a lot of pressures. The NFL is so competitive. You'll hear guys all the time say, and they bring in people every week to take our place. They're always looking at who the next person is, and the guys coming in are also saying, yeah, I know I have to take another man's job, right? So it's just competitive all the time. And imagine if you were in that kind of environment where you're constantly looking at the next person to you to, that you need to collaborate with and be a teammate to, but it's also know that might be gunning for your job.
Yeah.
It's a highly stressful, competitive environment. And I think on one hand, it speaks to our guys' high level of resilience, that they come and they show up to work and they perform at such a high level. I think I also, would be remiss if I didn't say, like, you got to understand these are human beings too. And they are under a great deal of stress. And for them to be able to produce the product that they produce on Sundays and Mondays and Thursdays and sometimes Tuesdays and last year Fridays too, and Saturdays, I think we got to, just kind of put some respect on who they are as men.
Absolutely. I mean, when you think about it like that, it's nonstop. I mean, it really is. And there, of course, a lot of careers out there in the world that are like that. But this, you got to be on all the time. And then you come
Mhm.
home and you have families and you got to be on for your families. It really is a lot. One of the things that we do, one of the main things we try to do, in addition to just educating communities around mental health and wellness, is the reduction of stigma.
Okay.
And when you think about, stigma has been such a huge issue and barrier to care, right? For care, rather, with a lot of people. And particularly, I think when you think about athletes and the fact that what you just talked about, you might have somebody gunning for your position, and you might not necessarily want people to know that you're in therapy or that you need to take, a week or two off, right? That could be, your job on the line for so many
Mm-hmm.
people. How does the PA deal, NFLPA and the league proper deal with helping to reduce stigma and letting players know that, hey, it's okay if you need to take time off? And we've seen this in other sports industries, if you will, whether it's Naomi Osaka or even Simone Biles at the Olympics, right? The biggest stage there was for her sport, and she was like, you know what, I can't do this right now. And
Mm-hmm.
so, how do you think, or how do you all even deal with the players around that when someone is dealing with a serious issue, but the stigma is there? Like, how do y'all handle that?
Yeah. So, I think as I think about your question, I think about it on a couple of levels. So, level one, I think in reducing stigma was, in 2019, the NFL and the NFLPA. And as we know from news reports in the past, sometimes that relationship isn't always the best, right? I think one thing, though, that we try to be abundantly clear about is that when it comes to this stuff, we're on the same page, no daylight between us. And so, you know, in 2019, they started they wrote the side letter to get it included in the CBA that all teams have a clinician on staff. And I think
What is the CBA?
the collective bargaining
Oh,
agreement.
okay,
That's the
yes.
agreement between the
Right, right,
players, the
right.
employees, and management as to what all the wages,
Got
working
it.
conditions, right, are going to be. And included in that, in one section, is the behavioral health program. And part of the behavioral health program is saying that all clubs have to have a clinician, a licensed clinician, right? And I think that's an important distinction, right? Because we're not, you know, some folks, and I don't want to say in our league, but in, you know, the person who is designated to manage mental health stuff, and I'm using those air quotes specifically, would be a performance person. And you know,
Hmm.
that person does not have to have a license to practice. And so it's important to make that distinction to say you need a licensed mental health clinician, be it a psychiatrist, psychologist, counselor, social worker. They have to have a license. They have to have 7 years experience, and this is and they need to be on site for a designated number of hours. I think what that does is it says to the entire population, this is something that we take seriously. We take it so seriously that we're going to devote resources to having this person in our space, in our building, in a way in which you can see them, right? And so I do think that goes a long way, just sort of doing that, having that person in the building. So you know, that's one level to take that. The other way in which I'm thinking about, you know, it's one of those things where you have to empower players not only to know that the resources are available to you, but to also empower them to be the uh, arbiters of what their experiences are, you know, and so they know themselves the best. So they know when to reach out for help. They know when to say this is enough, right? And I think having a clinician on staff can help to deliver that message. And so even if a player does not necessarily seek services from that clinician, having them there sends a message, right? And so players will reach out to their team clinicians. They'll reach out to us, you know, to seek services, and you know, in case they like their clinician but don't necessarily want to see somebody in the building. You know, we want to make sure, and we work in conjunction with the NFL on this to make sure that the messages are clear. You can go here, you can go there. We just want to make sure that you take care of yourself in whatever way you feel like you need to. And so, you know, I think as we've seen, the stigma has definitely gone down within the NFL, you know, and I think players certainly seek services at higher clips than they did when the program first started. You know, I think from both internally and from, at least from the PA standpoint, we see that increase. You know, I think players also feel more empowered to speak up when they need to take a break, right? Because we've seen those stories in the media. You know, a guy is having some concern and he is being vocal. He is, you know, the person who is sharing his story about what happened. And, you know, for the most part, the clubs have been very responsive and have responded in ways that, you know, at least from the PA standpoint, we're thankful for it, right? They're supporting folks as they're going through these things and not putting barriers up. And I think, again, you know, regardless of what you might think of the NFLPA or the NFL and whatever our relationship might be, you know, on mental health and wellness stuff, you know, we definitely try to be in lockstep everywhere that we can be, because we understand the importance of mental health in our players.
I love that, and kudos to the NFL and to the NFLPA and your team, because it is important, and we have seen players struggle, but I do think there has been a shift, and even in 2019, I had the great privilege of moderating a mental health summit that the NFL did here in Atlanta, Georgia, at Georgia Tech, and so I just love the fact that they are implementing, right, these new programs and strategies, and really taking it seriously and understanding that, because it's hard, right, with mental health, and you, right, being a psychologist, it's not the tangibles always that's there,
Right.
right? And
Right.
other challenges from a health perspective. And so you have to pay attention. You have to listen to the players, right? Like you said, and really take to heart what they're saying. So, just kudos to you all for doing that. Are there any other programs that you can talk about and share that you all offer for current players or former
Yeah.
players? Or I know the PAF does a lot, Professional Athletes Foundation as well. So can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah. So from the PA side, so within my role, so I am in the player affairs department, and we work with active players and early stage, well, I shouldn't say early stage, free agents, right? So
Okay.
guys who are in between. And so one of our signature program is our IR program. And so we understand that when players get on IR, particularly the guys who are on IR
Is that
for the
injured
entire season,
reserve?
injured reserve, yeah. Sorry, I'll make sure to
That's okay. Just for those that may not be sports fans but
clarify.
wanna
Yeah.
learn. I
Yep.
happen to
So
just know a little bit of the vernacular.
yeah. So guys who are on injured reserve, there's two forms, there's short term and long term. There's rules around people who are on short term and they can return. But it's the guys who are on long term, season long IR that we understand what it means, right? Like number one, that's a catastrophic injury. And for anybody, it doesn't matter. That is devastating, number one. It calls into question a lot of things about, your job and your position and all of that. And it's a time when, your brain is sort of regimented and used to being on the field and, having your days set up in a certain way. And from late July through December, like I talked about, or early January now, like you're at work. And when you get on IR, I don't want to say all that goes away. You do still have to rehab and all of that. And you do have some connection to the club, but it goes away pretty substantially. And we understand that that's a particularly vulnerable time for everybody involved, right? Like for you as the player, you are, obviously worrying about your recovery, your physical recovery, and having to make sure you sleep and eat right and do all the things to make sure your body can do its thing to heal itself. But mentally, we don't really have as many conversations about what it means to get injured like that mentally, right? Like I think one thing we don't talk about specifically is, the worrying about getting re-injured and having this
Yeah.
happen to you again and returning, and there's so many things. So we do a program for players who are on IR. And so we bring them either here to DC, or last year we went to Atlanta. And we have started over the last couple of years inviting someone significant and pivotal to your recovery. Because we understand that when you get on IR,
How
somebody
about
is
that?
on IR with you, right? And whether it's a significant other or a spouse or a mom, depending on how long you've been in the league, they are also used to you being in that routine. And so you being home and not being away at the club is certainly, I feel comfortable saying, a disruption, because that
Mhm.
doesn't necessarily have to have a negative connotation. It's definitely a change to the home environment. And so, we really try to take care of the player, the whole player, and that includes his family and whoever else is involved in his recovery. And really the goal is to just arm them with tools and resources to better manage the time away. What I have found in the 5 years of doing this is that, we will have our first session and we call it the psychological impacts of injury. And it's usually players from all over the league, so they may or may not know each other. And we try to do something to warm everybody up the night before, so that when we go into the session, it's not like, oh, okay, I'm not just meeting everybody for the first time. And it might take 2 minutes or 10 minutes, but you get them talking, and these men are very willing to talk about their feelings about the entire situation of being on IR. They're willing to go there. They're willing to sort of open up and share with others their experience of having this major disruption happen. And I think that, at least from the feedback we've gotten, that session is just so helpful, even if it is just, man, I was having these thoughts in my head, and just to hear somebody else say it before I was able to even express it was helpful in and of
Yeah, it's
itself.
like a validation, right, of thoughts of other folks on
Absolutely.
IR.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so, besides that session, we try to, like, talk about nutrition, talk about sleep, and just other resources that might help them. And so, yeah, I mean, that is our signature, at least the wellness department's signature program that we do for players during the year, or during the season, just to make sure that a population we know is just by nature of what happened to them is having a time that is different. We try to do some specific outreach to them as well.
That's wonderful and so
Yeah,
needed. Yeah, that's
yeah.
awesome.
And then, the other thing that we did pretty early on in my tenure. So when I started in 2019, the first couple of calls I got were from, agents or players, and they were, wanting to get resources wherever they were. And, trying to locate a resource for them was proving to be quite difficult, right? Because you
Mm,
have to sort of find somebody who has availability, find somebody with the particular skill set that you are looking for, that the player is looking for. And so it became something where I was like, this is taking too long. And is there a way to streamline this process? And so what we have been doing over the last 5 years is building our clinician directory.
okay.
Essentially, we recruit folks nationwide to sort of join us in our fight to kind of help players have the resources that they need. Be it, counseling or, couples counseling, individual counseling, substance. We're looking to be able to have resources that we can tap quickly, that we have vetted, that we
Of
sort of have
course.
given some eyes or a look through of their materials, so that we can at least say, yeah, we at least understand who this person is, and we would feel comfortable with you seeing them. And that really has cut down on our ability, or the length that it takes for us to get a player in to see somebody. We are usually making the connection within 48 to 72 hours. Whereas like when I first started, these things might take a week,
Mm,
between the back and forth. And so that has been helpful, and I think that one of the things that sometimes we hear is that players will say, hey, I appreciate my team clinician being there. I'll sit with them at lunch, but I actually just want to see somebody outside. And so it was like, okay, this group that we have, no one will ever know that you went and saw this person, obviously, unless there is some crisis situation that we have to manage, the rules become a little different. And for the most part, that is not what happens. And so just the comfort of being able to see someone on your own terms without the potential pressure of thinking that other people know that you're seeing somebody. And, I think sometimes there's a perception of what it means to see somebody versus the reality, right? And I think the perception sometimes, is more important than what reality is. And guys sometimes opt to see someone outside of the club. And we just want to make sure that we're here to support them in that.
I love that, and I like that you're continuing to add on to that clinician directory. If we have any
Yeah,
folks that we want to recommend, I'll definitely send them your way. And I think it
please
gives
do.
the players just a sense of peace and calm, right, and privacy, if you
Yeah,
will. So
exactly.
that's awesome. I only have one last question for you, Amber. I could talk all day
Okay.
because I love this. Psychology and sports, two of the things that mental health rather in sports that I'm really passionate about. I want to talk now about. We talked about current players. We're talking about retired players, right? And a lot of the players that are transitioning from off the field from on the field rather to off the field oftentimes struggle. They go through feelings of isolation and loss of identity in some
Hmm.
ways. And so how does the NFLPA support players' life after the game and the retired players?
Yeah, and I think this is an area that I know everybody wants to focus on, right? Because I think there are ways in which, the a player's experience of leaving the game can vary so widely, right? Like I think, when we look at Instagram stories, what we see are the retirements on their own terms. And we see, people, the parades and the accolades and the celebrations of the guys who get to, announce their retirement and walk away,
Or go on to become sports broadcasters or stuff, but
become
it's not
sports
like that for everybody,
broadcasters,
right?
right? Like, and that is one way to leave the game. I don't want to sort of misrepresent the
Mhm.
numbers, but that may be a much smaller minority than I think people realize.
'Kay.
And a lot of times people's end to the game is not on their own terms. It's either because of some catastrophic injury, right? And I think the thing about our IR program, what we certainly don't push hard while we're there, but we talk about, as the group wants to talk about, is, did you just play your last snap? Right? Like, and even if you didn't, in reality, even if the next season you rehab and you get back on a squad, are you thinking that? And what does that do to your performance to have that kind of playing out in your head, right? And for some, it's, yeah, I did play my last lap, and I know that, and so I need to be thinking about what all the next steps are, and that's what our program can help them to do. For some, it's like, nope, I'm getting back into the game. But yeah, the thought and worry about re-injuring myself is there, and it sort of made me and maybe everyone in my household start thinking about, oh my gosh, what happens when things are the end? So I say all that to say that, for a lot of guys, their transition out isn't as voluntary as I think we tend to see portrayed more so in the media. And so I think this is an area that, I can say the PA would love to focus more on, and just making sure, how are we capturing guys, and knowing that our league is so transient that, some guys who are free agents get back on clubs, and they, their careers may last for another 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years. It's so diverse in its way of happening that I think, it's sort of hard to capture. This is the group that's transitioning now, that you can target to them, or this is what that group looks like. But I think what we do on the front end is really empower players to be thinking about who they are, independent of being an NFL player. So we for years had a program called Athlete and the goal of that was to really foster the other sides of their identity, right? Athlete and entrepreneur.
I love that.
Right. And so I think the more that comes in the front end, I think the better you are prepared for that transition. And, we have an externship program. So in the off season, guys can go, I think some of them just got back from NASCAR. Like, they just did an internship with NASCAR for a few weeks to just explore options beyond football, because you'll hear them say, and, everybody knows NFL, not for long. And we know the stats that how long or short careers on average are. And so I think better education around, we know this is going to end, and it may not end the way you want it to end. So what steps have you taken, and empowering players to take those steps and think about those things, so that they are not sort of caught in the, in the stories we don't want to hear about what happened, the not so great things that happen during transition. But, we certainly have lots of resources for former players. You've mentioned the PAF several times. And that's really, a grant fund to kind of help players who have some needs that they come across, so things like when hurricanes happen, or anything like that, it's there as sort of a support. Then we also have the trust. So guys who have 2 credited seasons are eligible for the trust, and that just opens up a world of benefits, from tuition reimbursement to mental health benefits. Like, it's just there for that group of guys to use and build community with other guys. So there are many things that happen, and I think it takes a team approach. Like, what are the things that we can do while they're still players to prepare them for that transition? And then obviously, once they've transitioned, what are the things that we do to sort of support them, proactively, like the trust, or reactively if something happens.
That's right. Well, I'm glad that you have it tiered out, right? And that you're able to support those athletes at every step of their career and beyond. And we're certainly at Silence to Shame, again, we're so incredibly grateful to be in partnership with the NFL Players Association, to have done work in the past with the NFL, and hope that we can continue to collaborate and continue to enrich the lives, right, of these players and athletes, because certainly once they leave the game, they definitely need that support as well. So I want to thank you again, Amber, for being a guest on the Silence to Shame podcast today.
Absolutely.
What you talked about is truly enlightening. We have a lot of, families and parents that listen to this show. So even if their kids are just involved in athletes all around, I think what you said today can go a long way in helping to erase stigma, to encourage, parents to get involved with their kids,
Yes.
their spouses, to understand the importance of mental health on both sides of it, right?
Yes.
So this was great.
Thank you. If there's one thing I can say to sort of
Please.
round out,
Yeah.
like I think remembering that NFL players are first and foremost human beings.
Mm-hmm.
And for the wild and amazing and incredible things that they do on the field that we are in awe of on Sundays, they are still humans. They are incredibly talented human beings, right? And I think that sometimes when we see superhuman feats on the field, it for those of us not in this space and those of us who are spectators, you may forget, right? And so I think just to be mindful that whether it's an NFL player or it's a college athlete or a youth athlete, these are human beings first and foremost. And with that, like understanding that the experience of engaging your athlete identity is one in which we don't take lightly. It's not, it will build such resilience and skills that are transferable to all aspects of life. And it puts so much pressure and stress on human beings that I want to make sure that I say that so that we are remembering who we're talking about, and that we act accordingly, like these
Absolutely.
are humans first and foremost.
Athletes are humans first. And I tell
Yes.
people we all have mental health, right?
Yes.
People forget, people go, oh, I know about that mental health thing. No, we all have it, right? It's how you think, how you act, and how you feel. And if Lord knows, we put so much pressure on our athletes, whether it's youth sports or professional sports or collegiate sports. And so, like you said, Amber, they're humans first.
Mm-hmm.
And we got to think about, their mind, body, and their soul and their spirit, and be able to provide these resources. And so, again, that goes back to why I think this partnership is so very important. You guys chose to work with a mental health nonprofit to help really get this information out there. I look at us as like the little engine that could. We continue to hopefully, bring about positive information to the community, and certainly want to make sure that we are pouring back into our athletes at any stage of the game. And so, again, thank you for being on the show. Thank y'all for watching. Thank you for listening. Please make sure that you like, subscribe, and share. Push this out there. We need coaches. We need families, little leagues, professional leagues. If you got friends in college that are athletes, please send this episode on. It is so great. And don't forget to, if you want to support the organization, you can donate by going to our website, www.silencetheshame.com. And we appreciate it. So as we always say at Silence the Shame, make sure you take time, save a life, and silence the shame.
3, 2, 1. I think it's time that we start the conversation to silence the shame.
Silence the shame.
Silence the shame. Silence is the difference between treatment or pain, life or death.
Silence the shame.
Speak up now and silence.
Silence.
Silence the shame.